Welcome to today's Research Rumble. We're thrilled to have you join us. Of course, people are going to keep joining, but we like to get rolling right away because we always wish we had more time at the end. So it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Rumble. I'm Raymond Lee. I'm the founder of the UX Researchers Guild. As you must know, because you've come here, we're a community for researchers to come together, meet each other, learn together, network, maybe fulfill whatever purpose you might have in coming together with other researchers. So we're thrilled that you're here. We're thrilled to create this environment where you can connect. Just a couple quick links before we get going. If this is your first Research Rumble and you want to see some of the others, then we'll paste a link now in the chat for our YouTube channel where we post recordings of things. And if for whatever reason you can't see the entire session today, you'll be able to see the recording there in just a few days. We'll post this recording of Research Rumble number 3. Today is number 3. We also invite you to network as part of coming here. So we'll paste in the chat a link for a spreadsheet. It's, of course, voluntary. If you want to share your LinkedIn profile, you can, and use this as an opportunity to build your network and connect with others. So the spreadsheet we're using is the same one we've used for Rumbles 1 and 2. So if you've put your information in, it's there. But if you're new, add your information if you'd like, and you can connect with others. Third, we'll paste the Slack channel. We invite you to join the Guild Slack and continue the discussion there, and including one-on-one connections that you'd like to make. And finally, and most importantly, we'll paste a link for a survey or eval form. And we really hope if you're here, you'll take a minute to fill that out. Those help us a lot. One of the questions is, what future topics would you like to see in Rumbles? And we'd love that input. And now I'd love to introduce the incomparable hosts and creators of the Research Rumble. They're both researchers themselves, research leaders, strategists. They have a wealth of experience, which is what makes these Rumbles so good. Let me present Danielle Green and Jess Weiss, who are our moderators and creators of the Rumble.
Great. Thank you, Raymond. Thanks for that awesome introduction. Welcome, everyone. Rumblers, researchers, people who do research. It's good to see some familiar faces here. This is an interactive, meant to be an interactive event. So if you can and feel comfortable sharing your video, it's always appreciated, but certainly go based off of your own personal comfort level. Today, we are talking about quantitative skills and are they required to be a successful UX researcher? So the first little bit here, we'll go over why are we here, code of conduct, and then Jess and I will each take a stance, regardless of our own personal views. We'll each take a stance on this issue and summarize what we see are the main points in favor or against requiring quantitative skills in this case. So we'll take about 15 minutes to do that. Then we're going to send you all into breakout rooms of about 3 or 4 folks, and you will discuss among yourselves, continue the conversation, and bring those insights back to the main group so that we can all come together for a larger discussion on this topic. So be prepared to weigh in and sort of chime in with insights that you thought were interesting from your group. Finally, we will have a networking event at the end. So if you're interested in networking, you can save some of the longer introductions, professional introductions within your breakout room. You can save that for towards the end of the event. Jess, is there anything you'd add here to the agenda?
No, but I think you nailed it.
Great. So what's a rumble for you first-time rumblers? We bring this definition of Rumble to our events. So this is our philosophy here. We take this from Brené Brown, if you're familiar with Brené Brown's work. So a Rumble is meant to be a professional discussion, conversation, and to come to the table with a mentality of curiosity, vulnerability, and to hash out differences in a very respectful and constructive way. So we ask that you show up here with an open mind, try on new perspectives that you haven't heard before, see what they're like. I promise you don't have to leave with any perspectives that don't suit you, but stay curious, stay respectful, stay professional with your fellow researchers, and participate at your own comfort level. So if you're here more to listen than to participate, if you can just make that known in your breakout session, then you can participate to your comfort level. Great. So let's get into it. A really fun topic today, really somewhat divisive topic sometimes. Quantitative skills as a requirement to be a successful UX researcher. I'm going to start us off here by taking the stance of yes, quantitative skills are required for you to be a successful researcher. And then Jess will follow up with not so much, quantitative skills not being a requirement to be a successful researcher. And before we sort of dive into everything, I thought maybe to give us some clarity in our discussion today, I want to align around assumptions and general definitions, which is kind of our jam as researchers, right? Like maybe you've already said that sentence today to your stakeholders. Let's align around some assumptions and definitions. That's what we're going to do. So the first thing here is an assumption of mine is that most of you collect some kind of quantitative data. And where I'm pulling this from is just general experience and knowledge, but also results from the 2022 UXPA survey saying people who do research, 63% run surveys. So my assumption is that most of those surveys produce some amount of quantitative data for you and your teams. So most of you have numbers to tell other people. That's my assumption. So now that we've got that assumption going, what do we mean by quantitative skills? So part of my job at the Guild is to talk to researchers, and I've talked to many, many, many researchers. I can tell you I've met all kinds of extremes, folks who are completely anti-quant, refuse philosophically to assign numeric values to any of their insights. Power to you, we have taken a different path. And then I have people who like ran a hierarchical multiple regression this morning in R, but I don't know if I'd really consider myself a quant person. So I've met all kinds and everyone in between, right? But for the sake of this discussion, I think I'm going to make a claim here, which is that the minimum level of quantitative skills for me to call you, check the quantitative box, if you will, mixed methods or quant researcher, is that you need to be able to, one, compute estimates of the true value based on a sample of data. So like if you're reporting confidence intervals, you're doing this. The second thing that I kind of need to check that box personally is you need to be able to compare two or more groups statistically. So I'm just assuming some basic inferential statistics knowledge here. Frequentist, I would never not invite a Bayesian to the party. Where are my Bayesians at? You're here, you're quant, you're cool. But for those of you without maybe formal academic training and like maybe this language isn't landing so much, if you know what a chi-squared test is, if you know what a t-test is and you run those, if you run an ANOVA sometimes, that's what I'm talking about. So comparing groups, usually means, proportions, and reporting confidence intervals around proportions, differences. So that's my minimum definition of quant here. Are we okay with that? I'm seeing some nods, so Moving forward with, okay, for UX researcher, there's our minimum definition of quant, to be successful. To be successful. I think we could spend an entire afternoon on what makes a successful researcher. So I'm not trying to address this topic all by itself, but my definition for what success means here is two parts. One, stakeholder buy-in. So when you report findings, stakeholders take them seriously. That is one part of success to me. And two, research data backed decision-making. So when the organization takes an action based on your research findings, that action produces value, whatever that outcome is. Usually it's revenue, right? But clicks, signups, whatever it is. So put another way, your research insights turn out to be right most of the time. Taking a loose definition of right here. So that is success in my definition today. So with those in mind, why should you have that basic level of quantitative skill set? One simple answer is just getting hired, right? Especially in this job market. So two resumes being equal, someone who has quant versus someone who doesn't is probably going to win in that contest. Secondly, though, is just being seen, retaining your job, if you will. So being seen as a contributor who has a unique value among your team members. And what do I mean by that? So I'm going to make a claim here. It may not land with you, but business leaders can struggle to see the difference between our qualitative insights and like the junior PM who talked to 5 customers this morning and now has a 2-year roadmap. They struggle to see the difference. Even if you have a PhD in anthropology, they struggle to see the difference between qualitative research and just like I talked to a handful of customers this morning. So I think that quant helps folks retain that sense of this is a unique value that I'm contributing to the team. My next point here is just operational efficiency and like effectiveness, I would say. So when a researcher has both quant and qual, speaks both, they're able to combine both types of data in a single person's mind and then deliver just more powerful, more effective insights because they're able to process both types of data together. And then you don't have to involve other team members. I mean, certainly you do, right? Like that's part of our job too. But when just synthesizing insights, you can take both and put them together in a single person. And that seems to be pretty, I'd say that's pretty efficient, operationally speaking. Final thing, accuracy and being right, making the right calls based on research. So quanties in the room, because of how inferential statistics works, quant researchers are biased to report that there are no differences between groups, even when there might be. So we're biased to say there's nothing there. These two things are not different. These two groups are not different. These two designs are not different. On the flip side, folks with less quantitative skills who are maybe running a survey and then they're just reporting the means or the medians or just reporting the proportions, they're going to have a bias to say there are differences where there may not actually be true differences in your user population. So really quanti folks are actually sort of conservative. And less quanti folks are going to have more of a bias for action. That's just how the stats work. I'm talking for quant folks, alpha and beta error, right? So detecting differences where there are differences. So just philosophically here, quantitative researchers tend to be more conservative. So they're going to be less likely to say, yes, build the app, make the change, do the costly thing. Whereas less quantitative folks are going to be more likely to say, build it, create it, change it. And I would argue, although there's a time and a place for both, I would argue that organizations hire us to de-risk things. So they want us to be conservative. And quantitatively inclined folks will be more sensitive to risk than less quantitative folks. So that's my pitch today. We'll see what you all think later. I'm going to turn the mic over to Jess.
Thanks, Danielle. I'm actually a little intimidated. I have to tell you, so when we decided to split this up, I thought, well, I'll challenge myself and take the con side, because obviously we all sort of understand that like quantitative skills are really important, but you started with defining quantitative skills, and I was shocked that I didn't understand about half of what you said, and was like, oh my gosh, I think I'm a qualitative researcher, like tried and true qualitative from the bottom up. I've played with analytics, I've done some other things, and now I'm going, I do not have the chops for this. So I'm actually thinking through my cons as reasons that I would tell myself to not get into adding quantitative skills to my resume. So let's go with that perspective, because there's also a human cost for everything that we're doing. And you can go ahead to my slide, Danielle. But I think the way that I was looking at this was knowing that I've been a qualitative researcher for 15 years, and knowing the job market right now, I could reasonably assume that if I get hired somewhere, they'll say, well, we need you to also take on quantitative work. Can you build up those skills? Is this something you could add? Or if I were in the job market looking for a position and I wanted to make myself more appealing, I could also say, well, maybe I'll just spend some time doing a Udemy course and learn statistics really fast, right? Like I'll just crash course it and see if I can get caught up and have quantitative skills on my resume to be more relevant. So I wanted to look at what's sort of the human cost that goes into adding these skills to a pretty fleshed out skill set already. If I've got 15 years of qualitative research skills, is it worth it for me to try to be a quantitative researcher or add those things to my CV? So my first thought was, Jared Spool says there's a lot of difference between accurate and precise, that qualitative researchers tend to be accurate and quantitative researchers tend to be precise. And in most of the scenarios that I've been in, the only time we talk about precise is when the client says, can we run a survey to statistical significance? And we have to go, oh, you don't have enough money for that, or time, or resources. And we have to sort of explain why precise isn't always possible. And usually because we just run out of time. But generally speaking, most of the work that we do as UX researchers deals with humans who are squishy by nature. And so in my perspective, it's usually good to be accurate. It's good enough to be accurate to represent the trends rather than to be precise. I think the focus that Quant brings, like Danielle was just saying, to be kind of conservative and kind of granular and really, really specific, actually, unfortunately, sometimes causes us to miss bigger themes. One of my previous jobs, I sat next to the data team, which sort of goes into this next bullet, roles and responsibilities. And they were pulling all sorts of things into Tableau and running, Python and R and all sorts of, like, it was a foreign language to me. And I was over here doing usability studies. And at one point, one of the guys turns around and says, I cannot make any sense of these numbers. And he was looking at a pattern on a tree call. So like, you call a help center and they say, here, press 1 for this, press 2 for this, press 3 for this. They'd changed it. And he was looking at the patterns and he's like, I just don't know what's happening. Everybody's abandoning the call. And my qualitative perspective was, well, you changed it. They were expecting something to be on 3 and there is no 3. How many times are they looping back through? And so we started to come at it from a qual perspective and we solved the problem. But if we had just left it in his quant hands, he would have thrown his hands up and gone, I don't know what broke. We don't know how to fix this, right? So there's an interesting symbiosis, I think, between purely qualitative researchers and purely quant data teams. And so rather than trying to acquire the skills that the quant team already has, can I show up instead as a person who complements them, who brings a different perspective, who challenges the way that they look at their jobs, and build more collaboration internally, which every company wants. So maybe that roles and responsibilities is something that I need to play with. Could I just partner with the business analyst teams rather than trying to be a business analyst when really my skill set is looking at people patterns? And then that kind of goes into that cost benefit analysis. Is it worth it for me to try to pay money, go through a course, learn all of these things in order to be a better researcher? And is it going to pay off? Will I actually get the job? Will I get a promotion? How good will I be at it? How long is it going to take? Like, what is that real outcome? For me, my first question is always, I was terrible at math in middle school, much less high school, and then college was a joke, right? So it's more emotional effort, it's more physical effort on my part to try to learn those skills, when maybe I could recommend having a quant person hired to partner with me and make the case for, it's better for you to pay for an expert, and I'll be the expert in the qualitative space. One piece that I've seen, not often, but I've seen as a topic of concern, is data misrepresentation. Again, kind of leaning into, if I'm going to teach myself these skills, or if I'm going to try to acquire these skills, if I don't have enough training, if I don't have enough internal accountability, I can't guarantee that the quant numbers I'm sharing are accurate or fair, or that they're telling the correct story. They might be telling the story that we want it to tell, or the story that will make our bosses happy to get the raise, right? There's always sort of that chance that I've skewed it without realizing it, especially if I'm new, especially if I'm trying on a new set of skills and haven't mastered them. Really, that needs to be left to the experts. Hire a business analyst who has a PhD in numbers and, worked in all sorts of like CPA places and, big dollars on the table before they came here, so that they have a lot more awareness of all the things that could go wrong. I honestly don't even know, especially after hearing Danielle's introduction. I don't know all the things that could go wrong. I could really mess this up. Do I want that responsibility on myself? I don't think so. So yeah, like being careful with the data is really important. And then this last point is one that has been really key for me for the last several years. I attended a great research conference run by Rosenfeld Media, and they were talking about biases in the tools that we use. And these quant tools, these studies that we read, I use Polefish all the time. I love it, but I don't know where the panels are coming from. I don't know who all of those people are. And I don't always have the knobs and dials to guarantee that I'm going to get the diversity that I want, that I'm going to get an accurate representation of the groups that I'm trying to survey. There's a whole lot that goes on behind the scenes that we don't really understand unless it's made transparent. And I think in quant specifically, folks are more inclined to keep those details in the background because they're not the interesting story. And so we end up with masked biases going on in the background that really, even from the very beginning, skew the data that we're getting when we're talking about human data, when we're talking about real people. Danielle's face. You're good. I was wrapping up. That was perfect. Yeah, so I don't know. I think I started out a little shaky on cons, but I think I'm pretty solidly not going to add that to my resume anytime soon.
Great. Yes. Love that. Love those points. Okay, so we'd like to know what you all think. And the best way we've found to do this is to put you in breakout rooms and sort of think through things. I have a page for you of questions you can use to facilitate your discussion. So we'll drop that in the chat. But you're welcome to facilitate the discussion however you'd like as a group. So think through our quant skills required. We'll give you 10 or 15 minutes and then come back and share with us what you think. So let me make sure that your breakout rooms are available, and let me post this link in the chat here for the notes. And Okay. Jess, would you
Got
like to?
everybody? Yeah. Yeah, great. I hope you all had some interesting discussions. And I'm curious to hear, we're all curious to hear where you landed on if you think quantitative skills are a requirement to be a skillful UX researcher. So I think how we're going to do this today, just if you feel inclined and inspired to share something that you heard from your group, use the emojis at the bottom, the reactions. You can raise your, well, it's not reactions. What's the correct terminology? Do we have the raise hands option?
Yeah, I think we have hand gestures, but you can also use it's under reactions.
Okay, under reactions, you can raise your hand. There you go. You can, anyway, or if you're on camera, do this and we'll find you. And we'd love to hear just some of the things that you all talked about. Who'd like to go first? We'll do it. Also, we'll keep it to about 2 minutes each, just so we can get a couple folks in before we jump to networking. Let's have Austin. Go ahead and unmute.
Okay, so I think quantitative skills is a requirement, but I think it also depends on what niche of UX research you want to go in. I mean, there's not just like plain UX research. There's all kinds of like different subfields of UX research, like mobile UX research, e-commerce UX research, enterprise UX research. And these are subfields that I think incorporate aspects of quantitative research. For instance, in mobile UX research, you can gather like data on mobile app usage, user interactions, analyzing mobile analytics data. And in something like e-commerce UX research, quantitative methods are often employed to measure conversion rates, click-through rates, and KPIs related to online shopping behavior.
Yeah, great. And I think too, if you're working with a marketing team, right, ads and advertising, there's so much math that goes into that. Those are great points. Thank you. Kara, go ahead.
I had a great conversation with Amy and Catherine and Raymond. Thank you. We are all more on the qual side, but have worked with quant researchers, and I guess to keep it short, we find a lot of value in the quant side, but don't do it ourselves, and find that there's a lot of barriers to getting to good quant research, as you all discussed in your points. So our question is really an ask is, we would love to know some really great resources to ramp up efficiently our own quant skills in a way to kind of reach more of that minimum layer to potentially do some of it ourselves, or also to just gain empathy for our quant folks on our teams. Also to know where those third rails are, so that we don't, cross into, some of those guardrails that you mentioned, Jess.
Yeah,
that's our ask.
Yeah, that's a great question, and one I had myself too. Like, as a qual researcher, where can I get tools to ask the right questions of the quant folks? Right? If we don't even have shared language, we're never going to get to understanding what we're looking at, and we'll just fight or never use each other, never be collaborative. That's great. Let's Danielle, let's you and I collaborate on that. I'd love to post a couple of resources to maybe the UX Researchers Guild LinkedIn page.
And I will drop some in the slides as well. There's a book that just came out, I think in May, called Quantitative User Experience Research. Now, I just bought a copy. I haven't read it yet, but things like that might be a good place to start. So if we can post links.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Kara. Nasir.
Hi. So I had a lovely conversation as well. Today, nowadays, researchers, we are under immense pressure to demonstrate value. And ultimately, from my experience, is that businesses value numerical data. So the business language of the world is numbers. So if researchers can, utilize that, then our perceived value goes up by a considerable amount. However, the knock-on effect to that is that if we are, as researchers, are meant to mitigate risk, if I, for example, I was to go off and learn how to conduct quantitative research, then there's an elevated risk of me conducting that without the assistance of business analysts or data scientists. So it is a hard place to be, but I feel like the tide is definitely pushing that way, and it's, you know, the pushback is almost you know, impossible, you know. So there is a lot going on. I feel like we're all forced to evolve at this point. I don't do quantitative research, sorry. I'm purely qualitative. I always have been. But I feel like I'm here today because of that. I'm here like, okay, I need to open my mind, and as Danielle said, open my heart. So yeah, this is why I'm here.
Great. Thank you for joining us and for sharing that. We were saying too in the break, while you all were talking, Danielle and I had our own breakout. And we were saying it's really interesting. While quant is conservative and tends to be business minded and numbers oriented, that's also a space that misses a lot of the really emotional growth opportunities. Like qual researchers know that if I can get in front of a human and ask a couple of really important questions, I can point us in a new direction. I can think of a new feature. I can come up with a new thing that would make the surprise and delight and the numbers go up. But being able to partner with that quant person then to say, okay, here's how my numbers went up, and I can actually validate it and justify it. I think that's going to be an interesting push for all of us, that we're sort of used to saying, well, look, it got better. We made a recommendation and things got better. We have to start adding numbers to it. Awesome. James, go ahead.
Yeah, I think to echo Nasir's point that these the businesses almost strictly quant. The touchy-feely stuff does, it's like, well, go talk to the brand folks. But I came in here kind of funny. I was like, well, obviously we need to have quant skills. I was like fully like ready to be like team green here. But Jess, like I had the same reaction where I was like, I am a tourist. I don't understand half of that. And I still, like to refer to myself as a researcher. Maybe I take that down. I don't know. But, I think that the research comes in a lot of flavors. And I think that the qual has, such power to tease out, nuance and really kind of see through the data, because you have to have this, sort of deeper understanding that the quant can't get to. There's a sociologist from the 60s has a great quote of like, not everything that's counted counts, not everything that counts can be counted, right? Not everything fits neatly into these like neat little cells in the spreadsheet. And to your earlier point, Jess, of like, the bias embedded in the tools, there is this like assumption of certainty that comes with with math, that like the numbers don't lie, but they also don't tell the whole story either. So how do you kind of get to this point where I think you have to have both, but to also do to Jared Spool's point of like, accuracy versus precision, a lot of things don't need precision, right? Like I don't need a scalpel to like cut out a coupon from the newspaper, right? Like this is just I could rip it with my teeth if I had to. I just need to get it out. And the idea that you have to like have this level of rigor and precision for a landing page is absurd. And I think that if you just kind of dig in and kind of understand where people are gravitating towards and understanding where they're, kind of maybe tripping up on something, that's enough. And you don't need, statistical significance over a large sample study to understand that like, they like red versus blue buttons. I mean, it's just pretty straightforward, or not. Maybe that's actually more of a quant thing, but, on large behavioral data sets, but more of the like, as I encountered with the work I did at AAA, the big survey data we've been using for years was all about price. It's the most important thing. Make it the biggest and most clear thing on the page. And then they completely ignored that people come to AAA for psychological safety. Tell me I'm going to be okay. Tell me that if I get stuck on the side of the road, I'm going to be helped. My family will be helped and help me feel safe before bothering me with like how much this thing is actually going to cost. And I think that's where, qual really comes in to save the day. And I think, it's a matter about, again, picking your tools. I don't need that scalpel all the time.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like balance and moderation on both things, and cooperation, like all these beautiful things that we talk about in community and society, but we don't always bring into work and into research. Awesome. Thanks, James. Matthew, go ahead.
Yeah, so in our group we were talking about, and I was thinking, I think that when it comes to qualitative versus like quantitative skills, like when you were saying before with like PhD level like mathematicians, I think that there's like less variability of the information you're going to get from quantitative like people who do quantitative data, because again you're dealing with numbers and equations, and generally speaking a lot of them will, if they're understand like the whatever type of like parts of mathematics you're looking for, you'll pretty much get all like very similar information, whereas people who are doing qualitative, because of there's a lot more variability when you're working with people and you have to like figure out biases, and there's just a lot more variability that like you need to show yourself to have a really good qualitative skills, because like the quantitative, I think for the basic, like a lot of the basics, it's a little bit more easier to like figure out yourself if you know how to get information than just like knowing it sort of on the top of your head. So I think that the qualitative skills is a lot more important just because it's like there's a lot more variability in what you're going to get from the qualitative side.
I could see the business argument for not working with Qual though, because of the messiness, right? Well, now you're going to have to interview 20 people and it's going to take way longer, and you're going to have to sift manually through all of these answers. And we don't have that time and money. So we're going to hire a quant person who can tell us for certain this is what we should do, right? Yeah, this has been really fascinating to listen to, because we could go around and around on both sides all day long, I think. Awesome. Thanks. Sean, go ahead, and then we'll let Daniel wrap us up.
Yeah, I was in a small group with Carolina and Caprice. Carolina from Spotify, Caprice from Amazon. So really big names. And they both mentioned, and I agree, that it's kind of going in the direction where you just have to be skilled in both, because you're getting asked to do both. For them, both monetization is just a big company objective. They have to speak that language of really, it's like a quantitative dollars and cents kind of deal. But one of the questions in your doc was what's missing from the conversation. We didn't have time to get into this, so it's kind of an open-ended question here of how do you respectively define your own guardrails? Like if you're being asked to step into that quant space, to do market research, to do CX research, how do you define what you're comfortable, not comfortable with? How do you turn it down without getting fired? We feel like there might have been some discussion there of like, how do you avoid getting scope creeped into burnout and just becoming the research person at your organization? And so we'll love to hear more about that. We didn't get around to that.
Yeah, Danielle, do you want to answer? Or
that point, or the one in the chat?
oh, I didn't see the one in the chat.
Do you have a thought on Sean's point?
Well, yeah, I think to Sean's point, what I coach UX students, and what I tell my students is like, we can't all be good at everything. I think when you start to try to be the be all end all of everything, it's that good, fast, cheap scenario, right? Either I'm going to be really fast at all these things, or I'm going to be really quick, cheap at them. It's cheap to hire one person who can do all of it, but that pretty much guarantees I'm not going to be good at any one of them. I'll be okay. It'll be passable. And in my career, in my personal experience, I have had the most success getting jobs, keeping jobs, and being useful in jobs when I was super, super clear about what I did and what I didn't do. When I stopped saying I was a designer and said I have research, I got more job offers, better job offers, everything shifted, because I was really clear on who I was and what I could offer and how I cooperated with other teams and where I needed gaps filled, but also where I could fill gaps. But I think sometimes we fall into that generalist trap of, if I can just do all the things, it's real hard for people to see where you fit into their puzzle when you do all the things, and then how much to pay you for all the things. And I'm sure that advice does not hold true for every job and does not hold true for every person. But in my experience, that's the way that I lean.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. As a professor, it was really hard to take the stance that you need quant, even though I teach quant, because I encourage students, it's like, well, if quant isn't satisfying, don't put it on your resume, because then they'll make you do it. So, I couldn't agree more with what Jess is saying there. Half a sentence on the difference between data science and quantitative research. So as luck would have it, my partner's a data scientist and I'm a UX researcher with quantitative skills. It's a Venn diagram, just like how UX research and UX design are a Venn diagram. It's a Venn diagram. Data scientists tend to do more with scripting, especially in Python and R, and they use different techniques. So usually it's much larger data sets, live data pipelines. So then there's like data engineering things that go in. to data science, but sometimes there's a crossover of the questions that we can answer. Great dinner table discussions at my house, let me tell you. And on that note, yeah. And on that note, I think we will wrap up this discussion. I'm so thrilled with some of the insights that you shared today. I'm encouraged, and my heart is happy to hear about some of the nuance that was described from your small breakout sessions here. I hope we can continue the discussion a little bit and get to know each other better in our networking session now. So if you'd like to stick around, we're going to pair some people up and do a networking breakout round. So thank you for participating in this. We do post a summary of what happened here today. So that will be on our website along with the other research rumbles and summaries.
Danielle and Jess, thank you so much. Awesome rumble as always.
Oh, thanks
Wonderful.
everybody for being here. It's better with an audience, better with input from everybody else.
A lot of great perspectives here today. It was terrific.